Okay, fabulous. We should be good to go. As promised, we're going to start at 1 minute past 10 to be prompt. Um, so I'm sure a few people might drop in as we're going, but we will just let them come in. We won't do introductions because everyone knows everyone, but apart from our kind of guest speakers today. So thank you so much for your work today on the bladder cancer campaign. It looks phenomenal. And obviously we're entering kind of stage 2 here now, which is the bowel cancer campaign. And this will be running for the whole month of October. We've got two very distinguished colleagues on the call today who are supporting with some of the clinical information around bowel cancer. We've got Dr. Bushra Kawaja, who will be leading on the kind of 101 to bowel cancer and key signs and symptoms and things that you need to know. We're also joined by Lucy Elridge, who is the head of nutrition and dietetics at the Royal Marsden Hospital. We'll be talking about cancer and prevention and diet, but also in relation to bowel cancer in particular, but also potentially living with bowel cancer. We'll start off with their two presentations, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end, and then I'll start talking a bit more about some of the campaign materials that we have this time round, and where you can hope to see people's faces and collateral out across West London. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Bushra now, who will take you through a kind of introduction to bowel cancer and all the key things that you need to know and share with your communities.
Thanks so much, Stephanie, and thank you so much, everyone, to be here today. It's really lovely to see so many of you here. As Stephanie said, I'm Bushra Kawaja. I'm one of the GP leads for RM Partners. I've been with RM Partners for quite a few years, but only recently I've had the opportunity to get involved with patient engagement campaigns. So really happy to be here today. So we're talking about bowel cancer awareness. What I'm going to try to do is to talk a little bit about bowel cancer and actually why the campaign is so important. So next slide, please, Stephanie. So as Stephanie said, in October this year, RM Partners are running a campaign to improve the awareness of what the symptoms and signs of bowel cancer are. And the aim of that is to get people to go to their GP practices sooner with any concerns. The campaign's going to be called Don't Wipe Away the Signs. It's going to focus on people who are 40 and above, those from the lowest socioeconomic groups, because we know that these are the groups which tend to get diagnosed at a later stage with cancer. There'll also be a focus on people from the Black and South Asian ethnic backgrounds. And again, we know that these cohorts do experience health inequalities. The campaign will run in the highest deprivation areas across all 14 boroughs in Northwest and Southwest London. You will see posters on buses, underground, overground stations, outdoor advertising, social media. We're partnering with local and regional partners, as well as Transport for London. And as Stephanie said, the campaign will run from the 1st to the 31st of October. Next slide, please. So why is it so important? Because bowel cancer is the 4th most common cancer in England. 36,000 people are diagnosed with bowel cancer every year. It can affect the bowel anywhere from the large bowel going all the way to the end where the feces leaves the body at the rectum. There are some groups where it's a higher risk, but actually it can affect everyone, not excluding where you live, your ethnicity, your gender, your age. And the really key thing is there are things we can do to reduce the risk of bowel cancer. The biggest preventable cause or factor, of bowel cancer is having too little fibre in the diet. Knowing the symptoms is really, really important because the earlier bowel cancer is diagnosed, the more likely that treatment will be simpler and more successful. So just to give you some numbers, if the bowel cancer is diagnosed at stage 1, which is the earliest stage, then 90% of people, so most people, will survive for 5 years or more. But if you take it to the other end, so stage 4 is the later stage, if you're diagnosed at stage 4, only 10% of people will be still with us at 5 years. So as you can see there, early diagnosis of cancer, bowel cancer, saves lives. The bowel cancer screening campaign uses a FIT test. So it's a stool test which looks for blood in the stool that might not be visible to the naked eye. And this can be a sign of early bowel cancer. So patients between 50 and 74 get a kit in the post every 2 years. And it's so important for this screening offer to be taken up because, as I said, this is when the cancers can be diagnosed earlier, when they're more likely to be amenable to successful treatment. Next slide, please, Stephanie. So this is going to be the spiel which is going to be put out as part of the campaign with my picture there. So most people with bowel symptoms don't have cancer, but if it is cancer, making the diagnosis early is what makes all the difference in making treatment simpler and more successful. And if you notice any changes in your bowel habits, such as bleeding from your bottom or blood in your poo or unexplained tummy symptoms, or if you experience any symptoms that are not usual for you for 3 weeks or more, please contact your GP practice. So that is the key message. Next slide, please, Stephanie. So talking about the risk factors for bowel cancer, I've already mentioned there are things that can be done to reduce the risk of bowel cancer. We've already mentioned that eating too little fiber increases the risk of bowel cancer. And we know that 28% of bowel cancers in the UK are linked to eating too little fiber. Fiber can be found in plant-based foods, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, pulses, beans, lentils. And another link, dietary link, is red meat or processed meat. And when I'm talking about processed meat, I mean bacon, ham, pepperoni. And studies show that 30% of bowel cancers in England are linked to eating processed meats. Another really important one is being overweight or being obese. And we know that 12% of cancers in England are linked to being overweight or obese. Next slide, please, Stephanie. Smoking is also a risk factor. So we know that 7% of cancers are linked to smoking. The risk increases with the amount and the duration of smoking. It's really important to know here that, for example, shisha. So shisha is more common in certain communities. But does everyone know, and the answer is probably not, that one shisha session is equivalent to 100 cigarettes? So awareness around different types of tobacco smoking. So when I refer to tobacco smoking, I'm talking about cigarettes, cigars, pipes, and shisha. And this exposure increases the chance of polyps in the bowel. So this is non-cancerous growths, but if they're not treated, these then turn into cancer. Physical activity is also really important. 5% of cancers in England are thought to be linked to too little physical activity. And the recommended amount of activity is 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity or 75 minutes of vigorous activity a week. And alcohol is also linked to bowel cancer. So we know that 6% of bowel cancers are linked to alcohol drinking. Next slide, please, Stephanie. Getting older is a risk factor for most cancers, and it's the same for bowel cancer. However, it's important to be aware that bowel cancer is slowly increasing in younger people, so those between 25 and 49. It's not completely clear yet what's causing the rise. Family history is very important. So if you have a first degree relative, so when I refer to first degree relative, I mean a parent, a sibling, or a son or daughter with bowel cancer, that increases your risk. The risk increases even more if you've got more than one relative diagnosed with bowel cancer, or if they were diagnosed at a younger age, so less than 50. There are also some inherited conditions and syndromes. So some patients who carry certain genes, which means they're more likely to get bowel cancer. Lynch syndrome is one of these conditions, and people with Lynch syndrome have an 80% risk of bowel cancer. And when these people are identified, they are offered a colonoscopy every single year to look for bowel cancer. Another condition is familial adenomatous polyposis, and this is responsible for less than 1% of cancers. However, those with this condition are at a very high risk of bowel cancer. So they're offered a colonoscopy every 1 to 3 years. Next slide, please, Stephanie. So what are the symptoms that everyone needs to be aware of that could be bowel cancer? Well, any change in your poo, so having softer poo, diarrhea, or the other way around, constipation, anything that's not usual for you, bleeding from the bottom, needing to poo more or less often than usual, blood in your poo. And blood can look red, but if it's digested blood, it can also look darker and black. Pain or bloating or a lump in the tummy, or feeling like you need to poo even if you've just been to the toilet. Other symptoms which can signal bowel cancer or other cancers as well, actually, is losing weight without trying to. And feeling tired is also a symptom, because what bowel cancer does is it means that sometimes blood can be lost in the bowel without knowing, and this can lead to low red blood cells or anemia, which makes you feel tired. Next slide, please, Stephanie. So when a patient goes to their doctor with symptoms that could be bowel cancer, what can they expect? Well, they'll be asked to do a stool test called the FIT test. This is the same test that happens in screening, but it's really, really important that even if the patient's been for screening and the screening test is negative, if the doctor's given them another FIT test, it's really important to do it. And the reason for this is that in the screening test, it's 120 units of blood, which is classified as a positive result. But if your doctor gives you a FIT test, then even if you have 10 units of blood, it's considered positive. And this is because obviously screening is being done in the whole population, and these patients may not have symptoms. But if you have symptoms, we have a lower threshold to refer a patient on for a colonoscopy. The patient would also be examined, so this would be an abdominal or a tummy examination, and also an examination of the back passage, so a rectal examination to look for a lump of blood. The patient's likely to also be offered blood tests. So what can a patient be expected to be asked about when they go to see their doctor with symptoms which could be bowel cancer? Well, risk factors are really important. So the doctor is likely to ask about smoking history, family history, and as I mentioned, weight loss being a symptom, so the latest weight measurements, alcohol intake. And also the doctor will ask about any adjustments or any support needed for the tests or for the appointments. So that would include questions about any learning disabilities or mental health conditions or physical impairments, or if a translator is needed, if language is a barrier. Next slide, please, Stephanie. I think that's me done. So I will hand over to my colleague, Lucy Eldridge. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to give you a sort of whistle-stop tour of diet, sort of building on some of the things that have been mentioned already. Also just talking briefly about diet for those that have had cancer as well. Next slide, please. So this is the Eat Well guide that you may all be familiar with. And certainly, to be fair, from a general population point of view, if we can encourage people to eat this way, then that certainly helps with sort of overall health and well-being. Next slide, please, Stephanie. For those of you that work with different cultures, though, there are different versions of the Eat Well plate. So the first version you saw is based very much on a sort of Western diet, but these have been produced by dietitians in the UK to try and help with sort of when working with other cultures, to sort of really clarify the different food groups. And you can find these on the internet. So if that's something that'd be useful to the groups that you work with, you should be able to download these quite easily. Next slide, please. If we look at cancer specifically, one of the areas that one of the organisations that as dietitians we work very closely with is the World Cancer Research Fund. So this is a charity organisation, and all they do is look at cancer, food and physical activity. They look at all the research that's been done around the world, and then draw conclusions from it that are relevant to the populations we work with. So when working around this circle, it very much builds on the eat well plate. So there's sort of definitely the emphasis on having a diet that's rich in plant-based foods, which from that eat well plate is sort of two-thirds of the diet should be coming from plant-based foods. But that's plant-based foods in their broadest spectrum. So it's your fruit, the vegetables. It's also things like rice, pasta, potatoes, those starchy vegetables, your beans, your pulses, your herbs, your spices, and foods made from plant-based foods such as bread would all come under this umbrella, with the idea and the emphasis very much on eating as whole grain versions of that as possible. We also know, and this has sort of been widely publicised, but sort of re-emphasising it within the groups that we work with, limiting the consumption of fast foods. And by fast foods, it's those heavily processed foods. You can pick a salad up on the go now, which is great, and a salad would be very healthy for you, but it's more those very deep fried foods that tend to be very high in fat and in sort of refined sugars that we should be encouraging people to keep to a limited amount within the diets. The red meat, the guidance, again, we'll come back to it, but sort of 500 grams per week is the guidance for red meat, and no more than that. Tends to work out to about 3 meals a week made of red meat. Limiting those sugary drinks, limiting alcohol, and really emphasising that the research shows that people don't need to spend a fortune on supplements. They don't need to spend lots of money on nutritional supplements to try and prevent cancer. Yes, there are health conditions. If somebody's got sort of bone health issues, they probably will need to take vitamin D and take calcium. But people don't need to spend lots of money on supplements to try and prevent cancer. And this guidance is very much also pertinent to those that have had cancer, and certainly in our health, living with and beyond clinics, this is the advice that we go through with people. Next slide, please. So when looking specifically at bowel cancer, if you're looking for sort of a very user-friendly leaflet, then that QR code will take you to the Protect Yourself from Bowel Cancer from the World Cancer Research Fund. And we'll go through these headings. I've got slides on these headings, so I'll come back to them. But it'll very much take you through the risk factors and how people can sort of adapt their lifestyles to help protect themselves against bowel cancer. Next slide, please. So working through that guidance, we've sort of talked about whole grains, but certainly, the importance being fibre, trying to increase the amount of fibre within our diet. It needs to be done gradually. You can't take somebody that's eaten white bread all their lives, white pasta, white rice, and expect them to change the fibre overnight. So it's important that it's done gradually, sort of maybe changing the bread first and then sort of working up. Ideally, if people can use sort of brown basmati rice or brown rice, that's a way of sort of naturally increasing the fibre within the diet. but also using the beans and the pulses and the lentils are all really good ways of really ensuring that somebody has a diet that's rich in fibre. Again, just a note that if somebody's already had bowel cancer, has already had bowel changes, then this needs to be done slightly more cautiously, and they might need some healthcare support with that. Next slide, please. And very much also having that richness of plant-based. So we've said, ideally having 3/4 of the diet being plant-based, with a quarter coming from animal-based foods, if they eat meat and fish, that is. But it's also important that in that plant-based diet, it's as diverse as possible. We know this is really important for our gut health. It's important for our overall health and well-being. And this is very much coming through the literature that's sort of been published in the last couple of years. But really sort of encouraging people to sort of eat that rainbow, eat the broadest range of plants. In this you can see there's the lentils, the beans, the pulses. It's not just the fruits and vegetables that are key in this situation. Next slide, please. And not everyone recognises sort of what a portion of fruit and vegetables looks like. It's roughly around 4 ounces. But this is just a very easy pictorial way. Again, this the link on the slide. You can download this as a poster. You can also order this as a poster from the World Cancer Research Fund. So it's quite a nice sort of pictorial way. So if we were looking at something like your green vegetables up in the top left corner, 8 Brussels sprouts gives you a portion of vegetables. A whole carrot would be a portion of carrots, likewise parsnips, sweet potatoes. If somebody's eating salad, then that sort of cereal bowl, although I do think that's always a bit dubious because I've got the IKEA ones that are huge. It's the smaller, more traditional cereal bowl that would give you sort of a portion of vegetables if it was something like salad leaves or spinach. Likewise, a glass of fruit juice. We don't encourage people to make all their fruits and vegetables up in juices. One of the main reasons being is you miss out on all the fibre. But a glass of fruit juice or vegetable juice is another way of sort of getting that portion in. Or a good heaped tablespoon of dried fruit. That would also improve someone's fibre intake. So there's lots of different ways. And I say it is actually a bigger, it's been cut off slightly with the way I uploaded it to the slide. But you can order it as a lovely poster. So if you've got areas within your community where you can display things, then this is quite a nice way of doing it. Next slide, please. And then we've sort of talked about red meat and processed meat, but as I said, the guidance currently stands. It's no more than 500 grams of cooked weight. Certainly if we were doing a dish at home, 400 grams of diced lamb, for example, in our household would make a curry for us that would serve 4 people. So it depends really on how people consume their red meat, but certainly the recommendation is around that 3 portions a week and no more, and switching it out for the white meats. So red meat covers your beef, pork and lamb. So things like chicken and fish being encouraged to be the sort of the bigger dominant feature within the diet. Next slide, please. And being a healthy weight, encouraging people to have an awareness of what weight they are, and sort of working to sort of trying to be within that normal range. Weight does vary depending on your culture. So there are slightly different body mass indexes out there that you can download from sort of different health sites, again, depending on the populations you work with. Next slide, please. So also it is possible to eat too much of a good thing. So if you are working with people that are looking at at their weight. Again, this is a nice, again from the World Cancer Research Fund, but kind of a really nice pictorial guide again of sort of what a portion of food looks like. So if we were looking at a meal and you had your starchy base to your meal, then sort of 2 handfuls of pasta or rice. Granted, that depends on the size of your hands. If it was my granddad who had huge hands, probably want to weigh it. But sort of 75 grams of rice or pasta is a portion. 65 grams if you're eating egg noodles. Sort of half a plain naan, or 70 grams. And often people, once you've measured it out a few times, you kind of get an idea of what it looks like on a plate. And people don't need to then constantly be weighing. But it is a good way of just being sort of mindful about how you're eating and just sort of sense checking, am I eating too much of a good thing when I'm looking at my weight? And it's quite a simple way of somebody sort of sense checking their diet, and perhaps if they are overeating, just sort of very, naturally being able to just bring down those calories, and maybe help with the weight loss. And likewise, with protein rich foods, 6 spoonfuls of beans, peas, or lentils. 2 eggs is, it's the equivalent of 2 eggs, is the equivalent of 80 grams of meat or poultry. So just again, another way of looking at it. Next slide, please. And I should say that's a poster again that you can order for free from the World Cancer Research Fund, and quite useful to have stuck up in your community areas. With alcohol, I mean, it's been mentioned, there is strong evidence between alcohol and bowel risk, and I think maybe that hasn't been quite as publicised as perhaps some of the other cancers that we've discussed in the past. So very much encouraging people to be mindful of how they're drinking. The guidance is no more than 14 units in a week. A pub or a restaurant measure of wine is often around 2 units. So people just sense checking, the volumes they're drinking, being aware of the measures they're using, can sort of help make somebody a bit more mindful of the amount they're drinking. Next slide, please. So if somebody does have colorectal cancer, then there is again further guidance. Again, the World Cancer Research Fund published this in 2024, really highlighting that to reduce the risk of further complications after a diagnosis of cancer, trying to eat as healthily as possible, that emphasis still on whole grains, coffee, which we'll come on to. So actually, if we can do the next slide, please. There is actually evidence that's come out in the last couple of years that shows there are actual benefits to coffee in the diet. I think that sort of it changes, but specifically for bowel health, there has been evidence that shows both caffeinated and decaffeinated coffee can potentially improve health outcomes. Again, the only thing to be mindful of is caffeine can also have other effects. So if somebody has got bowel changes, caffeine, well, for any of us, caffeine can work as a laxative. It can cause palpitations, it can impact on sleep. So I certainly wouldn't be encouraging people to start drinking lots of coffee. But just as I said, interestingly, with the research coming out last year, there are some benefits to having coffee within the diet. Next slide, please. And likewise, sugary drinks. So there's many health conditions that have been linked with a high consumption of sugary drinks. So if it is possible, to keep them to a minimum, they tend to be empty calories. That's the way we'd often describe them. Your traditional can of Coca-Cola is about 13 spoonfuls of sugar. So, people being mindful of that. I suppose as an aside, a study came out from Norway that suggested there wasn't a substantial association between sugar sweetened drinks. They also did show that actually having fruit juice within the diet was associated with a reduced risk of bowel cancer. But I think for overall health and well-being, encouraging people not to have lots of sugary drinks in their diet is important. Next slide, please. And really, yeah, again, with your communities, there's lots of resources available on the World Cancer Research Fund website. You can order cookbooks. So if you're working with people that want more ideas about how to cook, what to cook, there are cookbooks that are free. They can be downloaded or ordered directly from the World Cancer Research Fund that are based on all the guidance I've just run through. So the recipes are tailored to that advice. There's also quite a nice cancer health check on there. So it's an interactive tool that somebody can work through to see if their lifestyles are making a positive or maybe perhaps a negative impact on their lives. So yeah, thank you very much. I'll hand back.
Thank you so much, Lucy and Bushra. We've got a couple of minutes now. If anyone's got any questions that they'd like to ask on what you've just heard.
I have two questions.
Yep, Felix.
The first question is, if a patient already done the colonoscopy and cut some polyps, and can he skip the screening stool test, which looks like a wasting of resources because it seems he need to go another colonoscopy every 5 years, something like that? I mean, can he skip the stool screening test? And the second question is about the colonoscopy. And I understand there's two ways. One is to use sedative, another is to use stronger anesthetic. So is it how the patient advised to choose different types of sedative or anesthetics?
So thank you so much, Felix. So to your first question, is it sort of somebody who's already under a program where they're getting regular colonoscopies? Is that your question?
Yes, he had done a colonoscopy and in fact cut some polyps. So can he skip the stool test?
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question, because actually bowel cancer is a slow cancer, and actually if you've had a colonoscopy in the last 3 years, then you should be good, because the polyps don't grow back that quickly. Whether or not skipping the screening test, I mean, it's a test that's there for you every 2 years, but I see what you mean. There's no kind of benefit, because it's just going to trigger another colonoscopy, which you've had already. So I probably wouldn't chase that patient if they hadn't done their screening. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful, that yes, after a colonoscopy for 3 years, you would be considered kind of okay. And unless it's those genetic conditions I was mentioning, they're higher risk. So some of them are actually having a scope every year. Thanks, Felix. And your second question was about the anesthetic?
And sedative, the choice.
Yes. So because I don't do the colonoscopies, I can't give you a definite answer, but my advice would be, if there is somebody who's concerned about the test, because understandably it can be uncomfortable, I would really urge them to not put it off, but to discuss with the nurses and the doctors who are arranging the test. And definitely, if somebody's particularly anxious, this can be taken into consideration. And there are, as you said, there are sedatives and there are things that can be offered. So yeah, my advice would be to speak to the team who are going to be doing the colonoscopy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bushra. Nikita.
Oh, hello. Hi. I just wanted to ask regarding diet for vegetarians. In our community, a majority are vegetarians, and they don't eat eggs. So it's pretty difficult, in that sense. So what would you advise? And what can we present to them when we have our talk with them?
So I suppose hopefully if they're not eating meat, they're therefore eating a lot of whole grains. So I suppose that's the benefits.
Okay.
I suppose wearing my very cancer hat, I always want to make sure people are having a good intake of protein. So I would hope if it's a community where they've always been vegetarian, they probably do have good intake of protein. It's sort of not sort of like some teenage girls I know that just cut the meat out and don't replace it with anything else. So, you know, I suppose the emphasis being on things like the beans, the pulses, and sort of the other sort of means, you know, if they're eating cheeses and things, paneer and things within the diet, encouraging them to continue to do so. So, but you're very much the variety, I suppose, is the key thing. So even if you know if you're vegetarian, the emphasis is still on having that broad spectrum of plant-based foods.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Hector, did you want to come in quickly before we go to the campaign resources?
Yeah, sorry. So just to introduce myself again, I think I met you all last month. I've been working on this campaign as well with Bushra and Stephanie, but I do have some clarifications and a question actually follow up with Bushra around and what Felix had asked, because it can get quite confusing. So even for my own just information, but also might be helpful for others. If you've had a recent colonoscopy or you're under investigation, should you still do a screening test? And if you're not sure, would it be advisable to call the free phone help number, which is the Bowel screening help number, just to double check? Because I think Felix, if your colleague or one of your clients or service users is unsure, always call the free phone help number, because they will advise you based on the situation or that they're in. So if they're under colonoscopy or had a recent colonoscopy and they've received a screening test, just call and double check if they should do it or not. Is that what we'd say, Bushra, maybe?
I think that's really useful advice because every case is so individual and it's really hard to give that kind of general advice. So if that helpline is available, I didn't actually realize they were able to give that advice. So if the helpline is available to give that bespoke advice, I would really encourage that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hector, for that clarification. I will circulate all the slides, etc. at the end, and alongside that, I'll send some information around bowel screening as well and the free phone number so everyone has that to hand. Just to comment on some of the resources as well that Lucy has highlighted here, please, if you get 5 minutes, go and visit the World Cancer Research Fund. It's an amazing website. There are so many free resources on there. And I think to answer some of the questions, and Nikita, around a vegetarian diet, I think there are bespoke cookbooks on there. I don't know if there's necessarily an Eat Well plate because that's structured by the different types, but there's definitely guidance around different diets, and it's an incredible website. As soon as Lucy told me, I ordered so many things, and my desk drawer is full of leaflets and promotional material. So I'll send across a link to that and all the kind of key things that'd be good for you to use. The other thing I just wanted to comment on as well from Lucy's presentation is that bit around sugary drinks. And I don't know if anyone is planning on weaving in some of this preventative stuff or lifestyle information, but I used to do some work in schools, or one of the things I found most impactful was if you empty out a bottle of Coke and you put 13 teaspoons or whatever it is in the bottle of Coke and you see how much sugar you're consuming, it's a real eye opener. I used to get everyone talking. And you could do the same with fruit juice. I know there is a slight caveat, but some of the other kind of common drinks that people pick up, it's startling how much is in there. Steve.
Yeah, hi. I'm Steve Catling from St Paul's United Reformed Church. Sue Erdley is the person who's sort of our link person, and she asked me to come on to this meeting this morning, which has been very interesting. I just wanted to follow up on the first question that was asked about pain relief, etc., for when you have a colonoscopy. My wife had blood in her stools, and she went along and had an investigation. They found polyp, but they operated on that there and then, removed the polyp without any form of pain relief, and she was in quite a lot of pain. And I was staggered that she was not even offered any form of pain relief. They just went ahead and removed it, and she said it was like having, you know, a burning cigarette inside your stomach when they removed it. And that was quite unusual, because my brother-in-law, who also suffers with polyps and has sort of fairly regular scans and things and colonoscopies to remove them, you know, always is offered pain relief. And I don't know whether that's not normal to not be offered some form of pain relief.
So, I mean, I can comment on that, Steve. First of all, I'm really sorry to hear the experience that your wife had, and it doesn't sound like that was sort of an optimal way of doing it. Now, the caveat is obviously I'm a GP, I don't do colonoscopies, but
Yes.
as I said to Felix, I think having that conversation beforehand is really helpful. So,
Yeah.
especially if you are if something that you are worried about, have the conversation about what the options are. And yeah, so yeah, I would hope that a comfortable procedure should be able to be possible for most people.
Yeah, I think she went there and not knowing what they were going to do, but they just went ahead and did it, and they didn't sort of even say, "Look, we've got to remove this polyp just to have it checked, etc." And they didn't say, "Look, would you like any pain relief?" So she just assumed, didn't even know what they were going to do, and I think they just went ahead and did it without really asking the question, which I thought was a bit, not particularly if you're of a nervous disposition. That's you probably should be given the option, but maybe that's just a bit of a one-off.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that, Steve. That sounds like something wasn't quite right there. We should always have that conversation and choice with the clinician. Exeter, did you want to respond to that point quickly?
Yes, thanks, Steve, for sharing. I've just put in the chat a Macmillan Easy Read around having a colonoscopy, and it does say that you could be given something to help you with pain relief. So it could have been an oversight, which is very unfortunate, but in most cases, you should be given that option, like Bushra said, of any pain relief.
Yeah.
So it's just an unfortunate circumstance. But yes, for everyone to be mindful that if anyone does go onto it, they should be advocating as well if they can to ask for any pain relief. But of course, the staff should also be offering this as well.
Yeah, I think, as you say, if you know that you're going for that, is to go there being fully informed to say that, if they are going to do anything invasive that's going to require removal, that, just say that, I would like any pain relief if it's possible.
Exactly. And before an appointment, you should be receiving some sort of information around having a colonoscopy as well. So it's very worthwhile patients or people that you know to read it. Yeah, because it's always in the small print, isn't it? And it can often be missed.
Yeah,
maybe
just on another point.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, just on another point. My sister has myeloma. Is there any increased risk of obviously that's a cancer, but is there any increased risk of other cancers forming as a result of myeloma? As in bowel cancer or any other forms of cancer. I know that's perhaps a little bit off topic as far as bowel cancer.
Yeah, no, Steve, I mean, I'm not a hematologist, but from my reading around bowel cancer for this campaign, I haven't come across any risk that links bowel cancer and myeloma.
Yes. Okay. No, that's useful. Thank you.
A little bit more a further question on the colonoscopy, because my understanding is that there's two choices. One is to use the sedative, which is the mild one, that the patient is awake. And there's another possibility to use anesthetics, which means that you need a specialist doctor to monitor the dosage of the anesthetics dosing, and also to monitor the heartbeat, blood pressure, all this kind of thing. So the question is that, because if you do not request this in advance, then maybe there's no specialist to monitor the use of the anesthetics. Am I correct?
So Felix, very rarely I have seen colonoscopies done under kind of, like proper general anesthetic, but it's really, really rare. And with the caveat that I don't do colonoscopies, but the reason for that is because obviously there are risks around general anesthetic, and you wouldn't give it unless you really need it. And in the majority of cases, and of course, we had this unfortunate story of Steve's wife, which of course sounds not ideal at all, but in the majority of cases with sedation, so sedatives, and with painkillers, analgesia, most people can achieve a comfortable procedure. So I hope that helps, Felix.
Okay, thank you. Understand. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's really good to hear so much discussion and kind of feedback. I'm very conscious of time because we've only scheduled this in and I've got a minute to go through these slides, but if everyone's happy to stay on for another kind of 5 minutes or so, I'll just talk through some of the campaign resources for the month of October. So Everyone can still see my screen. As Bushra said right at the intro, so the tagline for this campaign is "Don't wipe away the signs." And what we're talking about here is some of those kind of key signs and symptoms of bowel cancer that Bushra went through, is kind of encouraging people to be very conscious of that. A loo roll is kind of the big icon for this campaign. I think you'll remember when we had our initial introduction, I talked about having a very large kind of 3D installation, and everyone got a bit excited about that campaign. So this is the one. In terms of who we are targeting, we're running it across all 14 boroughs in West London, in areas of highest deprivation. We've got a kind of working relationship with Transport for London for this programme, and it means we're going to have kind of big coverage across buses. So whereas for the bladder campaign, we were looking at bus shelters, and you may have seen them out and about, what we're actually going to have now is our posters and kind of assets and collateral on the side of buses across London. So hopefully you will see those whilst you are out and about living your lives. The campaign is running for the entire month of October. Just to kind of reconfirm, the ask of you as community organisations and your support with this programme is to run kind of one in-person bowel cancer event this month, but then also that kind of continual promotion on social media of the assets, of all of the kind of linked information and media, and you will receive a communication toolkit in the same style as the one you receive for bladder cancer, with different messaging, etc. I know from conversations that you've got quite a few questions perhaps at that point of diagnosis and some of the diagnostics, that I'll send you further information in line or in addition to the toolkit as well. So if you have any questions from people around the diagnostic pathway element of bowel cancer, you can answer those. This slide here is just to give you an idea of what the assets are going to look like on social media. So again, we've got some familiar faces here you've seen from the last campaign, and these are all healthcare professionals and GPs from across West London who work very closely with our own partners. We have things going out on social media. So the platforms that we're using this time are slightly different. So if you remember, for bladder, we were targeting women. So we were using platforms that had the highest traffic with that demographic, for example, Pinterest. For this one, we're looking a bit more kind of wider meta. So by meta, I mean both Facebook and Instagram posts. We've also got some of this information going out on Google Ads, and also Ector's worked very hard with our colleagues at Jack Ryan to secure some radio station kind of airtime and space. So we're working with LBC Sunrise Radio as well, getting some of these kind of key messages out. Similarly, with Busher and Co.'s links with primary care, we have a toolkit that's going out specifically for primary care clinicians. So similarly to the community toolkit that you all receive, they receive one that's tailored to GPs with kind of more clinical information around bowel cancer. And then just going on to the exciting bit, so the mass marketing. So this is starting with the week commencing the 6th of October. So this is why I was just saying in terms of the London buses. So we're going to have kind of huge pictures of those assets across the side of London buses. Dr. Bushra Kawaja is the face for North West London, and our colleague Dr. Nav Aug is the face for South West London. So I should have introduced the session as you are in the midst of a celebrity, because you will see Bushra's face on the side of buses across West London. We are also working with TfL, so they are really engaging and promoting this campaign and activity with their bus depot staff. We know in terms of ethnicity and people who work there, they're our target audience, but also in terms of the lifestyle factors of being a bus driver, you spend a lot of time being sedentary, you're not moving around, they're potentially a higher risk cohort. So we're working quite closely with TfL around that, and that's across London, which is very exciting. We've also got overground and underground advertising. So just to give you an idea of the type of posters on the screen here, those big ones when you go and wait for the tube, Bushra and Nav's face will be there somewhere across northwest and southwest London. And similarly, the kind of ones when you're walking down the corridors of tube stations, these campaign information will be there. And then the bit that I mentioned before was the large kind of 3D installation in Brent. So we will send pictures as soon as that's up and live, but that kind of collateral where you're looking at the toilet roll with the symptoms of bowel cancer on, that's going to be a 3D installation coming out of a huge notice board, which we're really hoping will kind of start sparking conversation, get people really kind of engaged, activated with the campaign. So as soon as that's live, I'll send photos and let you all know in case anyone fancies a recce down there. And then here, I know I apologize for the very, very tiny writing, but I will send this to you by email in kind of slightly clearer format, but this is where the targeted ad placements will be on both underground and overground stations, and they are very targeted and chosen kind of deliberately. So an example of that would be we've got some of these posters going up at Heathrow Airport train station, and that's because we know that the workforce at Heathrow Airport is largely BME, and they're our target audience. So everything that we've done is very specifically looking at the people who we know are potentially more at risk of developing bowel cancer. And then just in terms of the assets, so last time for the bladder cancer campaign, you received both the posters and the wallet cards. We're going to hope that they were useful. I know you were saying that the wallet cards are of particular use at the end of conversation. So we've got these designed with this information. They'll be sent out to you. The other thing that you can request, but we're not sending out, but via the microsite, if anyone would like physical loo rolls with these symptoms printed on that look exactly like the things that are going out and about, you can order some for your location. So bit gimmicky, bit fun, but hopefully it's something that will get people kind of talking if you want to place them out and about in your community organisations and places. Hector, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so the reason why we're not opting to send out toilet roll to everybody as a standard is just that cultural sensitivity. We appreciate, having writing on tissue may not be culturally sensitive to some organisations on the call. So that's why it's an option for you to request it if you feel that your networks will appreciate that reminder when they're in the bathroom or when they're in the office. But like we said, it won't be on the microsite, Stephanie. We will be sending out a separate link so that you can order this at your leisure, basically. So we'll let you know how many you can order, but there should be enough to go around.
Right, thank you, Hector. Sorry, I thought it was on the site. So we'll send you a link. So if anyone does want toilet rolls that look exactly like the one on the screen, just let us know. And then in terms of if you want more posters, more wallet cards, etc., if you want any of the information to download a virtual copy of the toolkit, all of those social media images that you've seen, you'll be able to download from the microsite here. And then I've just put a link for bowel cancer in general. So if anyone has any queries and you don't know where to send them, what we always say is send them straight to the NHS website. That is the most kind of validated, sense-checked, concise information that we want to be sharing with our communities. And then at the bottom there, I've just put the hashtag like the previous campaign, any social media activity or things you're sending out. If we could just use the hashtag don't wipe away the signs, that would be fantastic. I think that is the end. There's always a shameless plug for our own social media at the end, so I'm going to keep that up there so everyone can see, but I think we're all pretty much linked in with each other's accounts now. Oh, Hector's corrected me again. I've made 2 typos in this presentation. So don't wipe away the signs without the apostrophe. I will remove that and send that across so everyone's on the same page and we know what we're hashtagging. Right, thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate that ran over slightly, but hopefully that gives you a kind of idea of what we're working with. Josh, sorry, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the evaluations and stuff to get those in. I'll be sending around the communications as well.
Yes, thank you, Josh, for that reminder. So I know we're just about to start cracking with the bowel cancer campaign, which is very exciting. But if I could just draw your mind back to the bladder cancer campaign, we have the monitoring form where we need to know some basic information in terms of who attended your event, numbers, what the feedback was, your kind of social media activity. If you could please complete that form, we really appreciated. The deadline for that is the 2nd, so you've got 1 or 2 days to get that done. And just a kind of polite reminder that the rest of the funding for this program is dependent on doing that. So if anyone has any questions and wants to talk through that form with me, please do let me know. Hector.
Sorry, and just lastly, jumping back to Bowel now. Sorry, we're going back and forth. It'll be great as you do your activities, your social media, and you do the hashtag. We're going to have a live feed of your community activity on the microsite. So that's just being created. So any activity you do, please share them through the WhatsApp via Stephanie, and also all the hashtags. So then what we'll do a live feed so we can see all the activity that happens across the month. So it's going to be bigger and better than bladder, but bladder has been great. The people that have come forward to our GPs for potential bladder cancer, but also other cancers, has actually happened because of the posters that they've seen. So it is really working, and we'll hopefully continue to do the same throughout the next few campaigns.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Thanks, Hector. Sarah?
I just wanted to ask if any of the groups want someone to attend one of their events. Is that a possibility if they want a clinician, I guess, to attend one of the events? Is that a possibility?
So I think for this campaign, potentially no, just because of timelines. Like some of our GP clinical leads, professionals are incredibly busy, might not be able to support with this particular one. But when we're working towards esophageal, which is happening in February, we've got a much longer lead in time for that campaign. So I think if someone would like a clinical presence there, do let me know and we can start organising that kind of sooner rather than later.
And can I ask you, Stephanie, Jennifer Murphy from St George's was offering to potentially attend some of the events. So shall we give her details to the groups? I think it would just be for South West London, I guess. I don't know if St George's covers any of the other areas of London.
So who Sarah's referring to, they are our bowel screening specialists. So they work with the screening program and the fit testing that we've been talking about. So maybe, Sarah, if I can pick that up offline, if we can get the equivalent for North West London and see whether they do have any capacity to support with that. So it wouldn't necessarily be a GP, but it would be a health promotion specialist who links in with bowel. So I'll pick that up with both yourself and Josh, and then you can liaise with the community groups. Thank you. Hector?
Yeah, just to add to that, Sarah. So there is Andrew Prentice who covers Brent and Harrow, and then you've got Abdo Ahmed who covers the rest of the North West London boroughs. So they should be on hand to support, provided you give their dates in advance. So October is I think Stoptober as well. So they'll be very busy with lots of activity. So if you can get your dates in for your events sooner rather than later, then Stephanie, yeah, we can share the contacts with everybody and you can liaise directly with them. They should be in the know about this as well.
Yes, they are. They are. Sumitra, did you want to ask a question? I think I saw you waving.
Is on the 4th, this Saturday, but the deadline for the form to fill up is said the 2nd, right?
Yes, that was what was in the original timetable. Obviously, if your event is falling after that, that's fine. We can have a separate conversation. What I would ask is that you just fill out the social media activity and then we can pick up some of the event feedback afterwards. So I'll drop you an email and we can, yeah.
I couldn't get a date before that for the event space.
Yeah, so no worries at all. That's fine. Great. Right. Thank you all so much for joining, and especially thank you to Dr. Busher and Lucy for joining and going through some of that key information around bowel cancer. I hope that's been informative. As always, I'll share the slides and all the information that we talked through today. But thank you all for your kind of support and work on these campaigns. It really appreciated.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.